Hello, fellow people! This is part 2 of my Hypothetical RWBY reboot. If you stumbled onto here by accident, please check the first video in the series where I explained what the hell this is and what I'm going to be doing with it. There will be a handy playlist in the corner. In this one, we'll be handling Ruby and partially episode 1 of the series, which in itself is a damn good introduction. I did some sketches on paper to get a hand of drawing her volume 1 design, and now I'm saving myself time by drawing over the best versions of her sketches. And trust me, there were more pages of tries that are very rusty and don't need to see the light of day. Ever. As I said in part 1, I'm not changing designs of characters per se, only adding more to them if needed. And there isn't anything to add to her design, to be honest. She looks amazing as is, especially in the splash art, which adds the details that aren't there in her Poser or Maya models, which will be a running theme for all of the designs. I really love the purple tones on her hood and cape, really makes all the reds stand out and not be washed out in each other, especially her hair and hood. Speaking of the 3D models, one shoestring recent limitations that I want to tackle is lack of body type diversity. Most we see is the same model, made taller or shorter with different sized boobs, or more or less buff in men's case, with everyone still being ripped regardless. And since first volumes established those body types for the cast, it would have been weird to switch them up with transition to Maya, which is understandable, so that's what we're gonna handle here in our You Without Limitations. I always pictured Ruby to be small and a tiny bit chubby, which her corset hides. Sidebar, but I made Summer chunkier too, so that makes sense. And her being tiny gave me a lot of trouble during the sketch. I had to redraw her legs 2 times, making them longer, and she still looks kinda weird. She would have to need a lot of strength to handle crescent throws, so she might have stronger arm muscles hidden under her sleeves. Though if you look at her fighting style, she's mostly using recall and her semblance to toss herself around, which her smaller frame would help with that. So I'm not really sure if she would actually have more muscle than that. I do love the fact that she's more suited for fighting Grim and not people. Really makes the team have their own specialties, and highlights her destiny of being a Silverite warrior mowing through Grim like she did in Red Trailer. And speaking of trailers and the ties to episodes, how about we talk about episode 1? Probably the only thing I like about Ice Queendom is how they expanded episode 1 to include color trailers in them and added more scenes of Shnice as well as Tai, Yanni and Ruby interacting. And some bonus Oz scenes, which is always a treat. For our hypothetical reboot, we'll just yoink that structure real quick. Remove the early fondness reveal from the Black trailer insertion portion and make it more vague, so our hypothetical first-time watcher would only know that Blake was involved in something shady and left to start a new life away from it. More on that in Blake's video. In best case scenario, I would like to include red and yellow trailers into the series proper too, but honestly I can only see a way to insert yellow one a bit later after initiation. If you have an idea on where to put the red trailer, please leave it in the comments. It might stay as the only standalone trailer, as it was a test for the series reception and isn't really tied to the story like the other 3 are. It takes place in winter, so maybe during the semester break, but it makes more sense to be the winter before Beacon. Maybe her testing out Crescent Rose on Graham right after she finished perfecting the latest version? I don't know. Imagine Ruby intentionally going to Summer's grave to make herself sad, to lure in Grim and test out new features of her weapon. We love self-torturing themes. Introducing the whole T arc very early on. And also Tiny in Red Like Roses Part 2, and the complicated mess of feelings she has on Summer's death, that she usually bottles up until she couldn't anymore in latest volumes. And that's not even mentioning the fact that even her semblance is literally breaking herself into tiny pieces to keep moving forward, which I have analyzed before on my Tumblr and won't rehash. Unless you want me to make a video on semblances and deep ties to the owners, I have a lot to say on all of them. Anyway, yeah, girl needs therapy like yesterday. Too bad it doesn't exist on Remnant. And speaking of Ruby angst and personal arc, one very common hissy fit going around is that Ruby is a bad character because it took so long for us to get to her breaking point. But that's actually not true. It's a slow burn build up until her breaking point. I mean, it might be not as noticeable if you aren't as in tune in with characters and implications of what they're going through. I'm not saying I'm the all-knowing entity reading all the characters' feelings, but I am an overthinking empath. And when you look at Ruby closely in retrospect, it's obvious at first that she's more focused on being a good leader, and after Fall of Beacon we have been shown plenty of times that she's barely keeping herself together. From having nightmares of Pyrrha dying in front of her, to feeling insecure about dragging Junior with her, to being done with Crow's bullshit and feeling like she's not good enough. The whole point is her bottling up emotions for others. She only expressed her real emotions like twice before Volume 9, once a tiniest bit in Kurayuri apologizing to John for dragging them along, and another time when telling Asuka that she is scared. But she has to keep moving forward because if not her, then who else? And that's kind of the core conflict of her character. But that's for Arc 2. For now, the only struggle she has is feeling not good enough in her role as a leader, especially since she probably knows her mom was one too. I really want to have more quirky personality traits she used to have highlighted in this reboot. Her being a weapons geek still shows up sometimes, but far less than it used to be, and most of her other traits are pushed aside to make way for breakneck plot pace. Sure, we can argue that she just grew up now, she doesn't have time to be silly, but she can still show some of that in moments of peace, like the scene in Volume 7, her freaking out of the mission board. More of that, yes? It sucks that budget limits are not allowing for more character-focused scenes of them just goofing off and being themselves aside the whole save the world plot. A girl actually got confirmed as newer version recently. She just like me for real, which is cool, we can use that. Give her more really specific interests and skills. At this point in the story, she's an awkward bean who wants to make the world a better place. She does have friends at Signal, but it doesn't seem like the connection lasted, considering we never heard from them again. And she has trouble making new ones, scared of embarrassing herself. And then does indeed embarrass herself. In my version, she learned a bunch of little skills that could be useful and make for good icebreakers, like sewing, knitting, baking, sign language, gardening, and the like. But she's too shy to actually use them to approach people, so they remain just as useful skills she might use sometimes. She totally baked cookies for the team all the time at Beacon, and then had to make another batch specifically as a sacrifice to Nora's hunger. She laments they're still not as good as her mom's, even though Yang, Tai, and Crow keep telling her they are. Tasty self-comparison themes coming in early. Now, one thing I really wanted to focus on in the sketches is her eyes. Because in the models, they don't look silver, they look grey, which has led to some confusion in the past, to the point of Ruby having to explain the difference with those little white dash things they apparently have. Rip to all the silver-eyed Mercury theories, it's been fun. In my art style, Ruby's eyes completely lack shading and are closer to white in color, to make them really stand out. Also, to make them even more supernatural and not early foreshadowing besides Osmond's cryptic first line, I'm gonna make them actually reflect light, which would make her look a little bit freaky. Imagine her getting a midnight snack and scaring the absolute shit out of White with her eyes glowing in the dark, reflecting the light from the fridge. Yang be like, yeah, that's normal. In what world is that normal? I mean, Yang's eyes change colors depending on her mood, so yeah. You do pay attention! Shut up before I throw something at you. I like that her eyes are mirrored, no pun intended, in other parts of her outfit. The emblem, the crosses, the silver bullet, which is a nice nod since that's a known weapon against werewolves, leaning into her illusion. I do wonder about the crosses, because Crow and Oz have them too, but obviously Christianity doesn't exist in Remnant, unless Hans Christian Andersen? Okay, overcooked. Actually, are there any Andersen fairy tales represented? I guess Winter and Wheatley being Snow Queen and Kai, but I don't remember anyone else from top of my head. Anyway, crosses, I wonder about them. They probably don't have a meaning on Remnant, but it's interesting to think about, especially since Ruby used to have a cross instead of her rose emblem too. We'll look at it more in detail in later videos, but I really want to bring back Ruby and Yang actually being sisters again. And hope I don't get mauled by bee-shippers in the process while talking about why it's not happening in canon anymore. Again. For now, I'm gonna throw in a fun little extra inner conflict point. This is not an official part of my reboot, but it is my side headcanon. You can take it or leave it. Imagine Yang accidentally stole Ruby's friends and or crushes before just by proxy of being the more outgoing, shining one, casting a big shadow on Ruby, adding to insecurities she already has from not getting people easily like others do. I do like inner conflict. And since I stepped on that landmine, here's my take on her sexuality, because apparently that matters. In my reboot, she's ace and either Ara or Byrom, depending on if the canon Ruby ends up with someone or not. I have my take on that, but I'm not gonna be putting any of this chip and shit in my reboot, only what has been shown before. Sorry, White Rosers, that means jack shit for you, but also fuck you, you know what you did. And before someone starts accusing me of shit, like, I don't really give a shit if there's anything for her or not. There is, good. It's the one I like, even better. There isn't and she's more focused on being a huntress, good for her, give me more RAs rev, we need it. I love being a multi-shipper with a clear line between canon and my silly ramblings, and knowing both can exist at once. And I think that's all for now. Новая аудиозапись. Я надеюсь, в этот раз я запишу чуть погромче, чтобы мне не пришлось потом эдитить все. One Schuster releasing... Вот придумала, конечно, термин, который теперь сама не могу выговорить, молодец. Probably the only thing I like about Ice Kingdom and how they explain... Probably the only thing I like about Ice Kingdom is how they explained episode 1 and expanded. Не explained. Почему я читаю explained? Блять, я читать уже не могу. Блять, чё у меня голос ломается? Вот это неприятненько. More and eight. Опять мы переходим в Техас. Сколько тут? Тут совсем немного осталось. Я, походу, сегодня еще и вайс запишу. Ой, как хорошо будет. I really want to have more quirky personality traits she used to have to be highlighted in this reboot. Блять, я вот это вот добавляю лишнее. Это to be, оно там не должно быть. У меня уже есть to have в начале предложения, блять. Ненавижу английский, отвалите от меня. Фу. Не, если бы я это сделала на русском, было бы еще хуже, потому что Руфан там слишком агрессивный для этой всей херни, ладно. Еще хуже, чем хейдом, каким-то образом. Почему-то Руфандом тупо хейтеры одни, это невозможно просто. And most of her other tweets are pushed aside to make way for breakneck plot pace. Сойдет, субтитры помогут. Sure, we can argue that she just grew up now, she doesn't have time to be... Еще одна нау слишком. Как я вообще это писала, блядь, я это проверяла вообще, я вроде 2 раза перечитывала, все равно дохерища ошибок. Твою мать, Сань, хотя бы перечитывай. Фу, где я остановилась, блядь? Give her more really specific interests and skills. По-моему, мои ногти тут класснули. Надо перезаписать. Прям интересно. Ладно, услышу потом в блуперах, если мои ногти классные, будет новый блупер. And I think that's all for now. We'll catch up more on the story in Vice's video. I don't know how to end this. Leave your answers to red trailer placement in the comments. Do we shoehorn it in somewhere or do we leave it as the only trailer? And do you think the crosses have any meaning in Remnant or it's just a fashion choice? And I'll see you on the other side.